If Sergei Pavlovich can pull this off, he'll be the most dangerous heavyweight of all time. With Sergey vs Tom Aspinall recently being announced to be an interim title fight at UFC 295, a lot of people were extremely excited about this announcement, as both of these guys have had a ton of success in their young UFC careers so far. But I personally think if Sergey can continue on the same trend, and if he's able to do something specific in this matchup against Aspinall, I think at that point he'll be considered, in my opinion and in the opinion of a lot of others, to be the most dangerous heavyweight of all time. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm JuicyMMA, I make opinionative MMA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. But anyways, let's get into it. Ever since Tom Aspinall made it to the UFC, he's had an extremely impressive career. Not only has he been able to get victories over very impressive guys at the heavyweight division, but probably even more impressively, he was able to get finishes and able to get wins in a bunch of different ways, which when you're talking about the heavyweight division, it's something that's very unique, as a lot of those guys are very one-dimensional. But in terms of Tom's stand-up abilities, he definitely had a lot of ability, as he has a really nice ability to throw out that jab, nice uppercuts, nice hooks, crosses, has an ability to switch stances at times as well, and even when you talk about his kicking game, it's also very good, as he has a nice ability to throw kicks to the legs, kicks to the body, and even at times throw kicks to the head, which once again, when you're talking about the heavyweight division, it's something that's very unique. And overall, when you look at Aspinall's stand-up abilities, although he is very good and very diverse, probably the best part about his game is how quick he is. Although Tom definitely has a good amount of power in his hands and in his kicks, by far the best ability of his game is his speed, as I said. He's faster than virtually everybody he fights out there. Probably the only guy at the heavyweight division that's faster than Aspinall has to be Gane. But besides Gane, Aspinall is going to have a speed advantage over literally anybody he fights. And just having that speed advantage alongside with a good amount of power that he does possess has led him to be extremely successful in terms of his stand-up abilities. But even besides his great stand-up abilities, Tom has a really nice ground game as well, as he has a good ability to take the fight to the ground, but once the fight does get taken to the ground, he also has really good abilities as well, as he has pretty good jiu-jitsu, has the ability to find submissions in a lot of different ways, whether you talk about a guillotine, rear naked choke, even a Kimura finish. He has a lot of different ways that he can finish you by submitting you, but also besides that, he does a really nice job at taking his time on the ground in order to find the position over the submission. And that's something that I mention in a lot of my videos, but a lot of times what we see from guys is they rush to find the submission and they end up losing the position, and the opponent either gets the upper hand on them in terms of a better position on the ground, or they're just able to stand up altogether. But when you talk about Aspinall, he does a really nice job at taking his time and either finding the submission or getting in a good position where he can throw ground and pound strikes and get a finish from there as well. And overall, it's pretty clear to see why people have seen Aspinall as a championship contender for some time now. But although there is a ton to love about Aspinall, there is one thing that I do want to mention that has been somewhat of a weakness for him ever since making it to the UFC, and that has to be leaving his chin up in the air after throwing some strikes. As at any level in the UFC, outside the UFC, at any weight division, regardless of that fact, it's always a bad habit that you don't want to have. But especially when you're talking about fighting at the heavyweight division, where these guys punch the hardest, alongside with the fact that you're fighting the best of the best at the UFC level, it's definitely an issue, and it's definitely a problem that Aspinall needs to address, as there have been a bunch of times throughout his UFC career where he tends to leave his chin a little bit too high up in the air, and really the problem with that is if these guys counter effectively, they can easily catch Aspinall and they can easily knock him out cold. And especially when you talk about the guy that he's going to fight next in Sergei Pavlovich, who's a guy who's known to not only get finishes, but also get them at an historically fast rate, getting a ton of first round finishes, this is definitely going to be a concern for Aspinall going forward. But now let's move on to Sergei Pavlovich and talk about some of what he does well. So when you look at Sergei's game, it's pretty clear that he does one thing, and he does one thing extremely effectively. He's a phenomenal striker out there. When you look at his UFC career so far, not only has he been able to beat a lot of guys and a lot of impressive guys, but he was also able to be extremely impressive while doing so, as he has finishes over Derek Lewis, Tai Tuivasa, and even more recently Curtis Blades, and he was able to finish all those guys in the first round. But the question at this point point is, why is Sergey able to be so dangerous so quickly? Well, in my opinion, it comes down to a couple different factors. The first factor has to be his overall pressure. Sergey does a really nice job at throwing out a lot of jabs, a lot of left or right straights, as he has the ability to switch stances, while also having a really nice ability to throw uppercuts and hooks. And basically what that does is he's overwhelming his opponents, and when he's able to overwhelm them, he's able to pressure them backwards and push them alongside the cage. But the next factor for why I think he's able to be so successful is he has a really long reach. When you look at virtually everybody he goes up against, he's going to have a longer reach than them. And the advantage to that is when he's getting into these brawls that he constantly gets into, when him and his opponent are firing at the same time, his shots are going to land first and they're going to land harder than his opponents are. Because besides that great reach that he does possess, he also has a pretty nice understanding of distance. And when you combine those two factors together, that's a huge reason for why he was able to get finishes on a lot of his opponents so quickly. But another factor for why I think he's able to be so successful is his overall chin. Now, of course, there are a lot of different guys that have a pretty good chin at the heavyweight division, but when you look at Sergei Pavlovich, I definitely think he is one of the better ones at that division. As when you look at some of his more recent matchups against Curtis Blades and even Tai Tuivasa a little bit, when he was getting into those brawls, although he was throwing a lot of power shots and connecting, at the same time he was getting countered a little bit and he was taking some shots as well. But the difference is Sergey had a lot more power than those guys and he was able to finish them, but also even the shots that were coming back his way, although they were powerful shots, Sergey has a good enough chin to eat a lot of those shots without taking all that much effect from them, and he has the ability and capability to continue to push forward and continue to throw his own shots. And I think those reasons that I just mentioned are a huge factor for why Sergey has able to be so successful over the years. But although Sergey has been extremely impressive and extremely effective in the UFC, there definitely is a weakness to his game, and that weakness has to be his wrestling ability. Because actually in his very first fight in the UFC, he went up against Alistair Overeem, who was able to take him down to the ground and hold him down for basically the entirety of that fight. And although that fight was a long time ago, the question at this point would be, how much has his wrestling improved from that point? Is he able to keep the fight on the feet? Has he improved significantly to the point where he even has a decent ability to wrestle, or has he not improved whatsoever? And if he hasn't improved whatsoever, that's definitely going to be something we're probably going to see in this matchup against Tom Aspinall, unless he's able to run through Aspinall like he's been able to do to basically every other opponent he has in the UFC. But now let's move on to the specific matchup between these guys and let's get into my prediction. So as I mentioned before, both of these guys definitely have weaknesses, and they have weaknesses that the other guy can take advantage of. But at the end of the day, I think this is going to be a very difficult matchup for Tom Aspinall. And the reason why I say that is every fight's going to have to stay on the feet, obviously, and unless Aspinall shoots in immediately, I do think he's going to have some problems on the feet. Because although I mentioned Tom is extremely fast and he does have a lot of technical ability on the feet, it's going to be really hard to deal with the overwhelming pressure and the overwhelming amount of shots that Sergei Pavlovich is going to send in his direction. And even if Aspinall shoots in for a takedown, I think Sergey is going to be good enough and skilled enough to fire in an uppercut or fire in a knee, timing up Aspinall's shot. And if he's able to do that, he's probably going to be able to knock him out that way. So although Tom Aspinall is definitely the more well-rounded fighter, at the end of the day, I just think it's going to be very difficult to get the fight to the ground and get past all those shots that Sergey is going to send in the direction of Tom Aspinall. And if he leaves his chin up in the air like he does a lot of the time, I definitely could see a first or second round knockout for Sergei Pavlovich, making him the interim champ of the heavyweight division. And at that point, I think I would feel comfortable to say, as crazy as it may sound, that he would be the most dangerous heavyweight of all time. And if you're interested on betting on this fight or betting on any fight, you should head to the first link in my description, which will take you over to BetUS, where you would get 125% of your money as a first-time depositor. And when you look at this matchup between Sergey and Tom Aspinall, I definitely think there's great value on BetUS, as both of these guys are a pick'em at the moment at minus 115 odds. But I guess only time will tell what does end up happening between these two guys. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Sergei Pavlovich has a real chance to be the most dangerous heavyweight of all time, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these two videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.